digital photo class. Just wanted to give you some basic instruction on Photoshop. So basically in Photoshop, there's about, a ton of things that you can do in here. We're just gonna hit on a few simple basics to get you started if you haven't used Photoshop before. And really this is targeted toward taking color photos that you're taking digitally and turning them into really interesting black and white photos. That's our goal anyway. So I've put 4 photos in here to work with to show you some basics. First off, you want to take a good look at your photo up close and make sure it's worth editing, that it's in focus, that everything looks good on it. This is a photo I took in my backyard a couple of springs ago. You can use the zoom tool over here, and basically the way Photoshop operates, and I'm not going to get into a lot of stuff you could easily figure it out on your own, but there's a toolbar over here on the left that has a lot of functions on it. I'll show you a few of those today. One is zoom, which looks like a magnifying glass. You can click that, and you can go in and out and probably making you dizzy right now. Generally, I ignore the magnifying glass because it's really easy to use the keyboard shortcut of Command plus and Command minus, and that'll zip you right in or out. And once you're zoomed in, you can see this photo doesn't look very sharp. It looks like it's out of focus. If I click the space bar, that'll give me this little hand tool, which allows me to grab and move and look at other parts of the image while I'm zoomed in. It looks like really nothing's in focus here, so I can't claim this as being a depth of field thing where some things are in focus and some are out. It looks like the whole thing's not sharp. But we could go up and use a filter and sharpen it, so using the sharpen tool. So we could go to something like unsharp mask or smart sharpen and try to sharpen it there. And so you can see it's sharpening at about 200%. I can unclick the preview button and you can see how it looked soft there. You can zoom in a little bit more. How it's softer on the edges, and when I do that again, it tries to sharpen it, but because the image is out of focus, it just does a terrible job of it. So really I would say this is a unredeemable image, unless you really wanted a soft focus image. And actually when I zoom out, it looks a little sharper, but you'd be better off retaking this photo or looking back at your photos and seeing if you've got a better shot of it. It's also why when you're taking photos, it's good to take a few shots, because sometimes on the back of your digital camera or on your phone, you can't really tell if it's in focus or not unless you zoom in and look carefully. So I'm going to X that one out and not save it. And this is the second photo I took that day of the exact same subject, and it is pretty sharp and pretty in focus. One thing on your digital photos you'll often want to do is sharpen them anyway, because sometimes they come out of the camera just a little soft and can be a little sharper, even if it is in good focus. So if we go up here to filter and sharpen, and then go in and use the sharpen tool, I'm going to hit the preview button and uncheck that, because basically it's already done it, but I can click the preview button and see what it looked like before and compare it. It seems a little sharp. I might back off that a little bit and hit OK, and then zoom out. And yeah, so that was, especially if you're printing this at a large scale, that little bit of extra sharpness would help. So sharpen doesn't necessarily fix blurry photos, but it'll make a good photo even better often. So what else can we do to this? So you could use crop and straighten and do some things like that. I'll do that on another photo though. For this one, let's look at the black and white filter tool. So actually it's not a filter tool, it's under image and adjustments. So under image up here and adjustments, that drops down, you go over here to black and white and click that. And then basically it turns your photo into black and white for you. But this tool gives you some parameters that you can tweak. So right now it's just in default mode, and we have all these sliders here that we can basically mess around with. So you can pull these things back and forth and you'll see things change. I'm just going to pull all the warm colors back. So reds and yellows. And basically that's starting to make things look really kind of crazy. You can do some pretty creative effects and make it look, it almost starts to look metallic. So you can actually have fun just manually messing around with these sliders. Just going to do that and go back to image adjustments. I'm going to go back into that again. And there's also these presets that you can use. So we could start down here with a yellow filter. And basically the reason it's called the yellow filter, blue filter, green filter is that with film photography, photographers like Ansel Adams that actually put a color filter over a camera that had black and white, over the lens of a camera that had black and white film in it, because it would actually change the way that the negative was exposed and would turn out. So you could use a red filter to do things like darken the sky, a green filter to lighten up grass and leaves and so forth. And so it basically mimics that function. So yellow looks a little bland, looks a little boring. We'll try the red, a little better. I'm going to skip some of these other ones and just go into, let's try the blue filter. And that becomes this really intense, super black in the shadows image. That's a pretty good one to use. You can also play around with some of these other ones. I'll skip that for now. So you could call it a day on that one. You might want to go and do some cropping, but I'll look at the crop tool on another image. So this is an image I took walking around Monmouth one day. This is just a door over, I can't remember what street this is on, but so I thought that was a good image just to show you a few concepts. One concept, looks like I've already cropped this one at some point in the past, but let's say we decided we didn't want this door to be so crooked. We can use the crop tool, because within the crop tool, up here on most tools, pretty much all the tools, at the top up here you have an icon for the crop tool, and here you could do some presets if you knew you wanted an 8x10 crop or something like that, but we're just going to leave it random, or just manual, so we can just drag it around to whatever ratio we want. But up here in this bar, there's some other things you can tweak, and for one thing, there's the straighten tool, and so we can use that. We can set a point we know that we want to be straight, so we could decide we want to have this vertical. Now let's go with a horizontal bar on this doorway. And you basically just click and drag, and it'll make a line, and you just draw it along the line you want it to follow. And then that made it so that that's the straight line. It also straightened up this orientation too, because that looks like a pretty good right angle. Also, crop tool is for eliminating any extra area you don't want in your photograph. So if I wanted to get rid of some of the sidewalk here, I could bring that in a little tighter. I decided I wanted to go just down on the door. I could bring that down a little more. I actually like having some of that in, so I'm going to leave that at the top. Not a great composition, but you can see how you could use it to change a composition that you didn't like. You could switch to having a square format, or however you want to do that. Also with this image, you could go ahead and brighten it up some while it's still in color. So you could go to auto tone or auto contrast. I'll just hit auto tone. You can see that brightened it up a bit. I'm going to undo that. You could also go to levels, and with levels you can drag, this is a histogram. I'll talk about that more in a future video, but histogram is basically a way of reading the light. So this little thing that I'm dragging back and forth here basically affects the dark tones. And so as I pull that over, it's basically moving those and making what was sort of grays into much darker, deeper blacks. And same thing over here with this right one, except it's the whites. And so I'm going to pull this over. And so you can end up with a really high contrast image. If I uncheck the preview button, you can see it's a pretty neutral, kind of bland image, and you can really punch up the contrast almost to an obnoxious level if you want to. And then the midtones are here in the middle, represented by this little gray area. So you have a gray area, a white area, a gray arrow, and a white arrow, and a, well, just neutral color area arrow there. All right, so you could use that to punch things up some. I'm going to hit cancel, just return that back to neutral. And then I'm going to go into the black and white tool again just to show you what we can do with this image. And so that's a pretty bland image. We could jump through the different filter options and see what we get. But I'm just going to go back to default and pull these sliders around myself. So if we look back at what this is like as a color image, you can see that's a kind of cyan sort of green color. And so if I go back in here and drag the cyan slider over, I can basically make that lighter and lighter and lighter. So I'm making the doorway much lighter. And I can pull the blues in the opposite direction. That's actually starting to darken this sort of inner circle. Let's just pull the magentas and see what happens. It's really not tweaking too much there. And so one of the things that's for is you can actually change the tonality of different colors in a black and white image. So that's why you want to shoot not in black and white on your camera if your camera offers that option, but to shoot in color, because you really can go in and tweak these settings and parameters and really change the image up a bit. So anyway, I'm going to get out of this image and move on to another one. All right, so this is another image from my backyard. So with this one, I think I'll leave the cropping the way that it is, but I'm just going to play with the black and white sliders one more time just to give you an idea. It's really fun to just go in with different images and try out things as you're altering this into black and white. So that's actually looks pretty good. I'll start with yellow again and see how that looks. And that's a really pale sort of soft tone. Red is a little bit more contrast, those pink flowers. Basically what often happens with these color filters, when you have a red filter on, any color that's in the red family, it tends to lighten it up. Same with the yellow, any color in the sort of yellow family, it'll lighten those up. And if I go in, let me get back into here. If I go into the green filter, it's actually lightened up some of the greens in the background and darkened the reds. And here's the blue filter, another really intense. I like the contrast on that the most. I think I would choose that one. I think that's a really good one. The crazier ones like infrared, if you've seen infrared photography, I'm not getting into that here. You can look that up on your own, but it mimics a type of photography called infrared photography. And you can actually do that with a modified digital camera that removes the infrared filter off of your camera sensor. It's an expensive process, but this is a way of kind of doing that in Photoshop. So anyway, get back out of there. I think the last thing I want to show you is just saving your image. So after you've edited your image, you could go into image and image size and change the size of it. Like 16 by 10 is pretty large, and it's going to be a large file size to save it as. It's 46 megabyte. You want to always keep your original when you're saving an image. So